This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone. You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and I'm back from a short break. I've been taking a few weeks off to get away from social media and, more importantly, to focus on some other projects. And today's video is all about my first thoughts. I'll be sharing more videos coming up, my thoughts on the election, on Trump's cabinet picks, and what's to come for the next political scam. But this video is going to be my first thoughts looking at the election and taking some time to mention something that maybe many of you didn't hear amidst all the, the hype and the celebrations from the statist of the left and the right variety. Yes, I mean those who believe that the government is the answer, the state is the answer, whether they support Donald Trump or they support Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or the Libertarian Party or the Green Party, people who recognize or who believe that the state is the answer. And those of us who recognize that government isn't the answer are stepping back and just watching like, oh my God, here it is again, the most important election of our lifetime that we're constantly being told is here every 4 years. Well, tonight we're going to cover all that stuff and more. But first, I want to invite you guys to visit my website, theconsciousresistance.com, theconsciousresistance.com. Guys, this is where I've been putting my content, my documentaries, my books, essays, interviews for more than a decade, since 2013. And we have contributors here, including Neil Rademacher, who you can find wrote some recent articles here about, for example, shielding your assets and defying government control. And then Anthony Samaroff from the UK did an interview called Toxicity, Clean It Up with Stephanie Seneff. Highly encourage you to check those things out. And everything I covered today will be here on theconsciousresistance.com in the show notes. So be sure to bookmark there, sign up for our email list, and stay tuned for more podcasts. All right, let's go ahead and get right into it. First off, before we actually look at my focus of this video, which is that non-voters won, again, more people didn't vote in the US presidential elections than chose to participate. We'll talk about that in just a moment, and how do we get those people motivated and activated to actually do something, because we surely can't say that everybody who did not vote is doing things like I do with exit and build, agorism, counter economics, focusing on solutions. A lot of people have just checked out and are apathetic. But first, let's address this claim that you've probably been hearing, especially from Donald Trump and his crowd, that the election was a landslide. And if you watch the election results come in on the first night, it was clear Trump and the Republicans were going to be winning eventually all of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And it was clear there was a lot of red on the maps. And so people were like, oh my God, this is a mandate. This is showing that Trump is, been given the go ahead from the American people to do whatever he needs, basically, or whatever he believes is going to be valuable for trying to save the country from the various threats that he points out. In reality, though, so this article says Trump won 51% of the votes, and headlines declared his victory was resounding in a rout, and his allies proclaimed it was a decisive win and a mandate. But now that we're, 3 weeks later, the votes have continued to come in, and Trump's lead is actually down to 1.6 points. And basically, as this article says, Harris could have won if she'd just done a couple points better in just a few states. And any argument that says that the election was a landslide is misleading, because it relies on recency bias, which is, of course, just looking at the most recent data and then making assumptions based on that, and using the wrong measuring stick. So they go in here further to sort of look at past elections. And I did my own research as well and looked at some of the elections, let's say the historic elections between Kennedy and, you could look at Nixon's races for election, for presidency. You can, go through the different history of presidential elections that are documented, and you can actually see that Trump's, compared to others, wasn't a huge blowout. And, there were other people who won by less numbers, only a few, but Trump definitely didn't make any historic records in U.S. presidential election, victories as far as votes go. Nevertheless, Trump supporters will continue to claim that this was some huge, massive victory. But just wanted to start there for anybody who hasn't actually looked at it. Trump did win according to these fake selection numbers, which I don't trust any of them. I don't trust that the elections are actually real. But if you're going by their numbers and the final count, Trump didn't win in some huge blowout. But let's look at the focus now. What's more important? How many people did not vote in the 2024 election? This is coming from U.S. News and World Report. And we have a couple other sources that we'll check out in just a moment. Let's check it out now. This is from, I think this was originally published November 15th. So it's been about 10 days since more than 10 days since this first came out, but it's still some of the latest numbers. More than 150 million Americans voted in the 2024 general election. And for the first time in 2 decades, the Republican presidential candidate won the popular vote. Still, a year in which control of the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives were all determined by slim margins. Preliminary data from University of Florida's election lab shows many millions of Americans who were eligible to vote did not. And it says, as of November 15th, most states had an estimated 99% of votes counted. So at this point, we've pretty much got all the numbers that it is that are going to come in. And they're saying 150 million people voted in general for Trump or Harris. So if you split that right down the middle, which obviously it wasn't split right down the middle, but if you do, that comes to what, 75 million each? Close to 90 million people did not vote. According to data from University of Florida Election Lab, approximately 245 million Americans were eligible to vote in the 2024 general election. So that's just 245 registered eligible voters. And this figure is based on the voting eligible population, not registered voters. So that's one distinction. So that's 245 million Americans. Because I shared this number after the election. Some people gave me shit right away and said, oh, Derrick, what about minors? What about this and that? I knew the numbers were going to pan out. I said 88 million people probably didn't vote. Turns out to be close to 90 million. Nevertheless, of the people who are eligible to vote in age and not excluded because of being a felon in some places, 245 million Americans were eligible to vote. 90 million of them chose not to vote at all, and 150 million split their votes between either Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, and of course a third party candidates out there. So the voting age population of 18 and older minus ineligible non-citizens and felons, right? So obviously now, of course, we could say that there's probably people who aren't supposed to vote that did get to vote, but even counting them, it still seems like more people chose not to vote. So 155 million votes cast, 89 million Americans, or about 36% of the country's voting eligible population did not vote. And it says here that preliminary data shows that about 64% of the voting eligible population in the U.S. voted in the 2024 election. So 64% is still a pretty high number of people who chose to vote. 36% people did not vote at all. So in general, broadly speaking, the voters do outweigh the non-voters, 64% to 36%. But when we're specifically talking about candidates, like did more people vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris than people who chose not to vote? Well, guess what? We have this other article here, which is looking at the same data. This one's published more recently. This is coming from environmentalvoter.org. 2024 was a landslide for did not vote. And they're basically saying the same thing. A new analysis by the Environmental Voter Project using data from the University of Florida Election Lab, which is the same thing we were just looking at, shows that 85.9 million people, eligible voters, skipped the 2024 election, far surpassing the 76.8 million ballot cast for Donald Trump and 74.3 cast for Kamala Harris. So 85.9 million people. And this one said it was somewhere in the range of, what did they say? 89. This is saying 85. So even between those numbers, whether we go with the 85.9 million or 89 million Americans who potentially didn't vote, both of those numbers were higher than the votes that were cast for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, and obviously for the third parties as well. And as they write here, if did not vote had been a presidential candidate, they would have been beaten by Donald Trump. They would have beaten Donald Trump, by 9.1 million votes, and they would have won 21 states, earning 265 electoral college votes to Trump's 175 and Harris's 98. As in most U.S. elections, the real swing voters in 2024 were those deciding between voting or not voting, and they overwhelmingly chose to stay home on election day. We can look here at this chart. They have some of the numbers. Hopefully you guys can see this fairly well. Let's zoom this in just a little bit. There we go. So we can see, just for example, they're going state by state. Alabama, they had 3.8 million eligible voters. There was only 2.2 ballots cast, 1.4 of them for Trump, 769,000 for Harris, and 1.5 million people did not vote. These numbers highlighted in yellow on the right column are for did not vote. And the ones that are yellow means that more people chose not to vote. The ones that are blue says more people chose to vote for Harris. And then the ones that are red, obviously more people chose to vote for Trump. There's quite a bit of yellow states. So more people in Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California did not vote than voted for either Trump or Harris. That's pretty astounding. We also got Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana. What is this one? Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, which is pretty surprising too. We go down to Oklahoma, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, pretty cool to see, and West Virginia. In Texas, 8.7 million people did not vote out of 20 million people who are eligible. So think about that. You've got 20 million eligible voters, only 11.4 even bother to come out, and they split their votes between Trump. Obviously, Trump had the majority there, 6.3 million versus Kamala Harris's 4.8 million, and 8.7 million people did not vote. Now, I know that some of you out there, especially if you're a statist or you believe really in the elections one way or the other, if you're a Harris supporter, you're thinking, well, maybe if those non-voters had just got off the couch, Derrick, we would have won this thing. We wouldn't have Donald Trump. And I'm sure that the people on the other side would be saying the same thing. If it was Kamala Harris who'd won, they'd say, well, Derrick, if you just, annoying non-voters just would get off your butts and get off the couch, then maybe we would actually win something. Maybe, the right side would have won. Now, unfortunately, many of the freedom movement people who have been duped by Donald Trump and think that he is, the hero here are celebrating his victory, and they're celebrating different people who've been picked, as I mentioned before, and I will be covering that in an upcoming video. But they're riding high right now. They feel so great. They're gloating, and they're also, of course, trying to make excuses already. But those people probably aren't going to hear my point here. But for those of you who understand that, to look at these numbers and to see that, let's put that back on the screen real quick. Where was it at? The numbers of non-voters. To look at these numbers and to see that we had, depending on the number, 89 million to, what was the second one? They said 85.9 million. So between 88 and 85.9 million people, almost 100 million people in the United States chose not to come out, not to vote. Now, of course, these people aren't all on the same page as myself. As I said earlier, these aren't all necessarily voluntarists, agorists, people focused on the exit and build strategy. A lot of these people are simply checked out. They're apathetic. They're tired. But I would also say, to me, another point to remember, as I've pointed out months ago, and we reported on this website, that nobody was excited about Donald Trump versus Biden. And in the end, they got Kamala Harris, which was somewhat of a coup within the Democratic Party, and they rushed her through, no primary and all that stuff. And still, even with this alternative choice, people weren't excited. So it's not surprising that, in fact, if you look at the numbers, less people voted in 2024 than they did in 2020. And less people voted in this election than they did in 2016. But 2020 was actually like a high watermark in recent years, at least for the last decade in the Trump era, let's say. Less people voted in 2016 and less people voted in 2024, but a good amount did vote in 2020, surprisingly, if you believe the numbers again, which I don't really. But my main focus on the rest of this video is, how do we activate these people? How do we get the people who are checked out and who are apathetic and who might see the same corruption that somebody like myself points out and say, yeah, of course things are corrupt, Derrick. That's why I don't bother. I'm not going to go vote. I'm not going to go do anything because, my voice is never going to be heard. It's corrupt. And this is what I would consider to be black-pilled. This is not my message. Now, for quite a while, especially leading up to the election, because I was calling out how the fact that both sides of the 2024 election were being funded by Zionist technocrats. And guess what? Zionist technocrats won the election regardless. People didn't want to hear it. They were calling me black-pilled, saying I was being negative. I've been accused of being a foreign agent more times over the last couple months than I have in years. And in reality, I think this is a white pill to wake up and stop being a child and to recognize that politicians aren't going to save you. And what that really means is that you have to actually take control of your life. This isn't some sort of hyperbole. This isn't just like speaking abstractly or idealistically. I'm talking very practically. If you understand my strategies of exit and build, get out of the banking system, avoid taxes where possible, stop using big tech, stop being dependent on big box grocery stores, learn how to grow your own food or be connected to the farmers and the growers near you, the people who are raising the animals, things like that. Get land if you can, work with others, build community if you can, get out of the big cities. Like, there are actually practical solutions so that you can live your values, your morals, principles now. You can actually live liberty now, rather than trying to run third-party candidates or simply just checking out and truly being black-pilled, or deceiving yourself and acting as if Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going to come here and save the day. No, that is, I think, being ignorant and being naive. But calling that out is not being black-pilled. It's being mature, it's being honest and realistic, and it's a white pill to recognize that politicians can't and won't save us. So instead, we have to save ourselves. Now, I've written quite a lot about this over the years and done videos. If you go to the consciousresistance.com and search non-voting, including right here, you can see my last podcast I did the day before the election, the argument for non-voting in the 2024 selection. And this essay I wrote in 2015, this might be an essay or a video, I can't recall, but a video I did or something I did called Non-Voting, a Strategy, Not Apathy. That's what I'm talking about. I'm a non-voter, but not because I've given up, not because I'm not going to do anything, but because instead I recognize that I have to vote with my actions every day. And so if you did vote in the 2024 election, okay, you did your little bit, that's over, right? Whether your guy won or your girl lost. The point is, now what are you going to do? Now you have to actually vote with your actions. Now you have to actually take control of your life and hopefully not sit around and trust the plan and trust that Donald Trump is going to come save you, or that some other candidate's going to come in 2028 and come save you. I also did this one, 5 tips for non-voters for voters from a non-voter, which I encourage you to check out. I did this one back in 2016. Voting is a ritual meant to divide. Non-voters are not to blame for President Trump. I did this essay and video called Here's Why I Don't Vote in 2016. I did this one about the creeping death of the Libertarian Party. So much that I've covered in the past, even going all the way back to one of my first videos in 2012, is voting an act of violence. And I encourage you guys to look more into this if you need to know more about non-voting as a strategy and not apathy. At the same time, I want to invite you guys to check out my other videos on voluntarism, because this is really the answer. I've been a voluntarist for years, and if those who've paid attention, closely, you've heard me talk about this, you've seen me mention this. We're also going to talk about exit and build, but I'm going to be putting more emphasis than ever in 2025 on voluntarism as the key, because I do think voluntarism, no, it's not anarcho-capitalism. It is a strain of libertarianism, but it is very specific. It is essentially anarchism, just by another name, because we want to create a voluntary world where all relationships are voluntary and consensual. And if you do that, you eliminate government. And I think, as I put in this video, voluntarism is key as we build parallel systems. And I'm focused on exit and build strategy, as I mentioned a moment ago. My focus for 2025 is going to be, how do I look at this number of 88 million people and 89 million people and 85.9 million people, and activate even 1% of those people. Even 1% of 85 to 89 million people being activated or learning about the exit and build strategy could completely change the country. If we could challenge the statists from the left and the statists from the right, and those who think that they're part of the freedom liberty movement, but now they're just going back into the two-party system, if we can activate even a small portion of the people who are non-voters from being apathetic, from being black-pilled, and show them the exit and build strategy, which I've covered extensively in my work, including my recent talk in Sedona at the Voluntarism Conference called Exit and Build, How to Live the Principles of Liberty Now. I highly encourage you to go listen to that. And I also did a 7-week exit and build challenge, which you can find here. And we're going to be putting up a landing page for very soon. And we talked about exiting and build from the food system, from the financial system, from the big tech system, as far as getting land for education and knowledge, how to exit and build from unhealthy and limiting mindsets and beliefs and habits, and then how to think holistically about this. And we could talk about exiting and build from the health systems. There's so much more, in so many ways this idea can be applied. I actually live it. This is a practice that I'm not just preaching, but something that I am actually living. I've done lots of videos on this, exiting and building from unhealthy mindsets and limiting beliefs. Exit and build, talked about this in numerous talks, talked about it with Mark Passio. I encourage you to learn more about this. And if you want to join me in this effort in 2025, as we end 2024 and go forward, thinking with this number in mind, 85 to 89 million people in the United States. And I don't even live fully in the United States anymore, but I'm still focused on trying to wake people up there because I understand the importance of it. If we can activate even 1% of those people, then we can change the direction of the United States for the better, and not through Donald Trump and his Zionist cabinet picks and a couple of reasonable people who maybe won't change things, but actually by taking our lives into our hands and recognizing that we have to be the change that we want to see. I mean, I know that sounds cliche and it's overwrought and it's overdone, but it is truly the truth. If you want to see a more free world, a more just world, whatever ism that you abide by or lack of ism, if you want to see a more free world where your rights of self-ownership and sovereignty and individual liberty are respected, then I encourage you to learn more about voluntarism. You can go to my website. As I said, I've got numerous videos on this and talks on non-voting and voluntarism and on exit and build. Spread the word, but more importantly, live it yourself. Watch my exit and build 45-day exit and build challenge. It's 7 weeks in a row. Take it at your own convenience, but start applying these ideas to your life. Politics and politicians are not going to save us. And thankfully, the non-voters have won again. More people chose not to vote than they chose to vote for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. But that's not the end. That's just having non-voters won't fix things. We have to have activated, principled non-voters. We have to raise the level of consciousness up to the point where people recognize that voting is consent. And by consenting to these games, you are tacitly endorsing and allowing them to happen. Instead, you have to pull your time, your money, your energy, your moral support, your spiritual support away from these systems and focus on building parallel systems with voluntarism as the root. All that means is that whatever kind of life you want to live, at whatever ism you have, as long as we all abide by the principles of voluntarism and we say, hey, I respect you and your self-ownership and your beautiful, free, independent spirit, and I'm not going to use force, fraud, violence, or coercion or government force against you. You create the world that you want, and I'll create the world that I want, and we can live together peacefully, coexist. We can self-organize and spontaneously organize. It is 100% possible, and we can do so without the violence of government and without the violence of statism. This to me is going to be my major focus for the next year at least to come, and really for the rest of my life. And it has been for years, but I will admit that in the last couple of years, as I've focused more on my journalism, I've kind of stepped away from really promoting the voluntarist, agorist message, but I'm going to get back to it more than ever in this coming year and beyond, because I know that this is the key. If we can show more people that there is a ethical and moral philosophy that does exist that would allow each of us to flourish and to be our own beautiful selves, so long as we don't use force and violence on each other to achieve our goals. If more people recognize this, then perhaps we can take them from a state of non-voting and being apathetic and saying, YOLO, fuck it, I'm just giving up, I'm checking out, I'm just smoking weed and getting drunk with my friends on the weekend because the world's going to shit anyways, right? Especially for the younger generation who feel that way and who are being indoctrinated to believe that. If we can activate even 1% of those people and help them see that there is a philosophy that can help humanity flourish, and there are solutions to get there. We can use the exit and build strategy to take ourselves out of this statist, corrupted, immoral, unethical, and evil paradigm and build parallel systems with voluntarism as the root, and we can see humanity flourish. But it's not going to come through government. It's not going to come through politics. It's not going to come through Donald Trump. It's certainly not going to come through Vivek Ramaswamy or Elon Musk, my friends. So the non-voters have won. We won again. Unfortunately, yes, there is still a president. I know a president will come either way, but the point is we have shown that people do not want voting. They do not want these people in power. People aren't interested in Donald Trump. They're not interested in Biden, outside of the people who are either cult members or who are, blind and falling for this psyop, like a lot of libertarians, unfortunately, people left and right who are falling for this Trump psyop. But for those of us who see that politics aren't the answer and we want real solutions, guys, let's work together in 2025 to activate the non-voters. Let's take them from apathy towards voluntarism, towards solutions, and learning more about the exit and build strategy. I'm going to leave you with a clip from my favorite Native American radical activist, John Trudell, from his 1980 Thanksgiving Day speech. And it's Thanksgiving Day when I'm recording this, so it makes sense. And John Trudell, just this small clip is about why voting is not the answer. So thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
We're faced with a very serious situation in this generation. There are insane people who wish to rule the world. They wish to continue to rule the world on violence and repression. And we are all the victims of that violence and repression. We, as the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, have been resisting this violence and this oppression for 500 years. We know that the black people have been resisting it for at least that long. And we know that the white people have had to endure it thousands of years. And now it's come full swing to this generation that we live in. Nuclearization of the world. You see, this cannot be, we cannot allow this to continue to go on. We cannot do it. You see, we cannot expect that the pro-nuclear oppressor, that other side, we cannot expect that they're going to change for us. They are going to become more brutal. They are going to become more repressive. We are power, but they have separated us from our spiritual connection to the earth, so people feel powerless. We look at the oppressor and we look at the enemy because they have the most guns and the most lies and the most money. People start to feel powerless. We are power. We are a natural part of the creation. We were put here on this sacred Mother Earth to serve a purpose. Somehow we are betraying our purpose here, and that is why we live in the confusion that we live in. They tell us, they want us to believe that we are powerless. We are a natural part of the earth. We are an extension of that natural energy which is spirit and which is power. Power. A blizzard is power. An earthquake is power. A tornado is power. These are all things of power that no oppressor, no machine age can put these things of power in a prison. No machine age can make these things of power submit to the machine age. That is natural power. And just as it takes millions and billions of elements to make a blizzard to happen, or to make the earthquake, to make the earth to move, then it's going to take millions and billions of us. We are power. We have that power. We have the potential for that power. I remember in the 60s and the 70s, and I heard all this thing about power to the people, and I never really understood because everyone was saying power to the people, and they were talking about demonstrator, they were talking about vote, they were talking about dealing on the terms of the oppressor. Our power will come back to us, our sense of balance will come back to us when we go back to the natural way of protecting and honoring the earth. If we have forgotten how to do it, and if we think that it looks overwhelming and we can never accomplish it, then all we have to do, and each of us as an individual can go out and we can find some spot on the earth that we could relate to. Feel that energy. Feel that power. That's where our safety will come. The earth will take care of us. We have to understand that the American corporate state will not take care of us. They do not care about us. Maximize their profit. That is where their whole life value is placed upon maximize the profit. They will turn us against each other to maximize the profit because they have done it in the past. That is war, and they are waging it against us. They bribe Congress. They bribe your elected officials. They terrorize and intimidate your elected officials by getting the FBI to blackmail them. Those are acts of war. We will have to come to a time in our lifetime, and it will come in our lifetime when we are going to have to deal with the fact that the enemy has taken over your government. The government is not your ally. The government will use you, chew you up, and spit you out. You think that we are wrong? You think that we are talking unrealistically? Then go look at your elders and see what has happened to your elders in your machine-age society. See what kind of respect that they get. See what kind of a voice they are allowed into your society, what kind of input they have.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.